Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to part one of the winter maintenance course. My name is Mike Fitch with the Ohio LTAP Center here at ODOT, and we appreciate your participation in this training. Please note that today's session is the first of a three-part webinar series with part two tomorrow and part three on Thursday. As we get started, please take a moment to locate the questions box in the GoToWebinar panel. And if you could, go ahead and type in your initials and send those to us as an informal roll call for today's session. This way we can also see that the questions box is working today. So I see those responses arriving already. Thanks for that. Throughout the course presentation, please use the questions box to send in any questions you might have, and I'll be dispatching those periodically to the instructor for comment. With that, we will go ahead and turn things over to Bruce Drews. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. Bruce?
Thank you, Mike. Like Mike mentioned, my name is Bruce Drews, and I will be your presenter today, and I'll have a little more of an introduction in a little bit. Mike also talked about that this is a three-part series. Part one will be today, and today we're going to talk about snow removal policies and plans, and a little introduction about snow removal, because it will come. Then part two, tomorrow we're going to be talking primarily about some of the equipment usage, motor graders, we'll talk about maintenance, and then we'll also talk a little bit about winter survival, because you're out there in that weather, survival is pretty important to us. Also then on Thursday, we're going to have part three, and in that session, we're going to be talking primarily chemicals and abrasives. There's a lot of different types of chemicals that are being used out there, and we'll talk general terms about a lot of those different types of chemicals. We'll also get a little more specific about some of the most common chemicals that are used, please feel free, like Mike had said, to use the chat box if you have any questions, any comments as we go through the program, and he'll be forwarding those questions on to me so that we can take and make sure we address them as we can. There may be a few questions that I will kind of pause on and let you know that we'll answer those questions a little bit later on in the program. But for the most part, feel free to ask your questions as they occur to you. The chat box is great for that. Appreciate the Ohio LTAP and also the Ohio DOT for some information and also for supporting this program today.
Hey, Bruce, thanks. Just to mention, please use the questions box, and then I'll be dispatching those to Bruce through that. So thank you. Yep.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Thank you. I always have a saying, Benjamin Franklin used to always say, the only thing certain in life is death and taxes. But I found over the years that winter will always come also. The cold, the storms, the snow, the wind, as well as the complaints, because people are not bashful about giving you a call and complaining about it. Or if you're in the coffee shop or you're visiting some of your friends, you'll definitely hear complaints about the weather. So I always say winter will come. This presentation was originally developed by the SALT Institute as part of an agreement with the LTAP program back in 2003, 2004. I've greatly modified it, and so you'll see some pieces and parts that refer pretty extensively to sodium chloride and some of their products, but there's way too many other products, so I've modified a lot of the program to take and address that. Again, my name is Bruce Drews. A little bit of my background is that I've been in the transportation industry for a little over 40 years. After my military service, I came back home to my residence in Idaho. I live in Boise, Idaho. Have lived around the state of Idaho most of my life. I have lived in some other parts of the country, including Illinois, New Jersey, California, and Alaska. But Idaho is my home. And I started out originally in transportation as a pipe layer back in the late 70s, early 80s. After being buried a couple of times, I decided I really wasn't an occupation I wanted to stay in. So I started working for the Idaho Transportation Department in their maintenance section. Traveled to eastern Idaho with them, plowing snow, doing maintenance up out of the what's called the Island Park area, which is outside of West Yellowstone, Montana. Generally speaking, up in that area, we'd see anywhere from 4 feet to 9 feet of snow. And so we used plow trucks, motor graders, rotary snow plows, loaders, a lot of different types of equipment for maintenance up in that area. Then I moved into construction, worked for about 13 years in construction and also maintenance up in eastern Idaho. Then in about 96, I moved back to Boise, Idaho, and was working in the training section for the Idaho Transportation Department. And at that time, that's when the Idaho Transportation Department moved into using magnesium chloride for a lot of their winter maintenance chemicals. They still used a lot of salt, but their primary emphasis was towards magnesium chloride. And I developed a couple of different training programs and worked with the Federal Highway Administration at that point to assist in the development of the RWIS, the Road Weather Information Systems, and the anti-icing program that is available through your LTAP program in a computer-based training program format. In 2000, I moved to the LTAP program here in the state of Idaho and performed the training activities for the LTAP program here in Idaho and also the executive committee. Worked with the executive committee of the LTAP program until about 2009. Retired from the LTAP program here in Idaho in 2013, and ever since then I've been doing consulting as a instructional contractor for a lot of LTAPs and also a lot of other organizations around the United States. So that's kind of who I am. I've been in training for a long time, and this is one of my preferred classes that I like to teach. So some of the things that we're going to talk about, some of the things that I want you to take away from this training is, how do we set the expectations of the client? Those, you get people moving into your area, you have people that build houses or live in your jurisdiction. How do we set their expectations? And I know here in the Boise Valley area, we're having quite a problem for the simple reason that we're getting quite a number of people moving into our valley that are coming from areas that have no snow, down in California and Arizona and those types of areas that have no winter as far as snow is concerned. They have one expectation, we have another. And so that creates a lot of problems and so we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about, who in the agency needs to know what is the organization's snow removal plan. Every organization should have one, and every organization needs to take and have that documented. And we'll talk about that. And what should be in that snow removal plan? What type of expectations or what type of operation should we take and include in that snow removal plan? And then also, what creates liability for your agency? Snow removal during the wintertime, we take and, we'll see a lot more crashes. We may see a lot more inconvenience for the traveling population, depending upon what type of weather we're going to be facing. But by the same token, um, what's the liability of the agency? So we're going to talk a little bit about that liability. So, but first, what I'd like to do is Mike has a couple of questions that I'd like him to ask you. And if you take and go ahead and answer those questions, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Yep, thanks, Bruce. We've launched our first poll question, and we'll give everybody some time to respond. What type of organization do you work for? And those responses are arriving. Very good. Okay, we've got about 60% of the votes in. We'll give a few more seconds. Okay, let's see what we have. So, Bruce, of this group, 82% are from local agencies, 10% from DOT, 0% from associations, 6% from private organizations, and 2% from LTAP or FHWA.
Excellent, excellent. Can we go ahead and launch the second polling question?
Absolutely. So here we have, what do you do for that organization as our second poll question. And we'll give everybody some time to respond. All right, we got about 60% of the votes in. We'll give some more time. Okay, let's see what we've got. So Bruce, we had 20% who said technician, 44% said maintenance worker or operator, 25% supervisor, 4% city or county manager, and 7% educator or trainer.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I appreciate your responses to those polling questions. It gives me an idea of who all's in attendance, and kind of allows me to take and get an idea of kind of the conversation that we're going to be dealing with. So, when you take a look at, as you're working around in a winter environment and you start getting that first snow, or you get a secondary snow in the winter program, do you ever get the phone call of, when you're going to plow my road? You know, having that client call you up and wondering when you're going to get out there and plow the road. They're getting a little concerned that maybe they're getting a little bit of snow on the ground, or somebody calls up and says, I just moved here. I've seen your plow go past my road twice. Why have you not plowed my road yet? I have to get to work. Have you ever had that type of question call in, and that's kind of indication that maybe there's a little communication gap here between what's your policy or what's your procedure and what type of routes are you going to be plowing and working on, and what should be their expectation. I've had it happen a couple of times where I've had somebody call me up and said, why aren't you out here plowing my road? And they don't understand that you got school routes to deal with, you've got primary routes to deal with, you got secondary routes, you've got other routes that you need to deal with also, and so there's a little communication there that needs to take place. Or how about a phone call that says, Officer Smith called and said that South 3400 West is slick and unsafe. Now, that's a real problem when your law enforcement officers are complaining about a roadway, and especially we've had it happen a time or two here in the Boise Valley area, that we had a law enforcement officer get on the news one day and said, boy, I don't know what the county put on this roadway, but boy, they sure made it slick and dangerous. Well, boy, that creates a lot of liability for that local jurisdiction by having that law enforcement, because they're viewed as being an expert, and by the same token, they may not know what all is going on, and so there's a communication gap there that you need to take and feel. Or maybe, I know that my road is private, but can't you just plow it this once? That can lead to some major issues and problems, especially as if you're plowing that private roadway and it's not a roadway that you're authorized to plow, and you hit something, a car, another vehicle, or another item, and the landowner takes and files a claim against you. That creates a real problem for your local agency or jurisdiction. But these are some common phone calls that I've seen over the years, for both the local jurisdictions as well as the state DOTs and some of the other organizations. So how can we take and remove some of those phone calls, make it to where it's a little easier? So let's first take and talk about, why do we take and deal with snow? I've had some maintenance people say, hey, I sure like to be able to stay in bed past 3 o'clock in the morning and sleep in like I know, like I do on a weekend or on another period of time, but it's snowing out. I need to get out and go out and work. Well, we need to be able to keep those roadways clear, as clear as possible. Now, in some areas, in some parts of the country, keeping them perfectly clear is impossible. But by the same token, the driver's expectation is that they want to be able to travel on that good, safe roadway. And when it becomes unsafe, when it becomes slick and dangerous and a hazard to the traveling population, that's when we start getting complaints and also creating some liability. And so, those types of situations create us a problem. We may have traffic jams. I know, in our bigger cities, we get a little bit of snow, uh, and boy, it just snarls traffic up really badly. I know that, I've been in Washington, D.C. a couple of times when it snowed, and boy, it virtually shuts that city down. Same thing in some of the other big cities. You get congestion, frustration, maybe a loss of work because people aren't able to get into work on time, or they're not able to get into work at all. And, in Ohio, you take a look at, there's sometimes that your county roadways or some of your city streets may become closed, or you may have to close the schools. When I worked in Eastern Idaho, there was a number of times we had to contact the school and say, "Hey, we're going to be closing all these roadways, because of this winter storm. Uh, you need to make plans for getting those kids home." Matter of fact, there was a number of times that I took and led the bus out on some of our state and county roadways to make sure that the bus was able to get out and drop off the kids where they're supposed to be going to. And that creates another problem in the regards of loss of time for the parents, because if you have a child that's coming home and both of the parents are working, who's going to watch the child, or who's going to take care of the child? And that creates a burden on those families that, we're expecting their kids to be at school. Now, in this environment that we have, of course, a lot of the kids are going to school online, but, by the same token, it does still create a problem when you start closing roads and you start having a major storm that's creating problems, and kids aren't able to get to work, parents aren't able to get to work, are all things that we have to take and deal with. The other problems that we have, of course, is emergency operations. When you take and you have a really good snowstorm and the wind's really blowing and moving that snow and it has lots of ammunition, and somebody has a fire in their house because a chimney fire, or their house catches on fire, or somebody has a medical emergency, all those things, that snow creates problems for all those emergency responders. It's going to delay their time of being able to answer that emergency call, answer that activity or that problem that they're having to deal with. So, when we take and try and deal snow to try and keep those businesses open, keep the emergency people able to travel our roadways, make sure that our clients, our people that live along those roadways, are able to take and keep working and doing their daily business. And when we take and we have a major storm, we see a major loss of production, substantial lossage of dollars, wages, also the amount of materials that people buy. It's pretty surprising anymore how quickly our our stores and our other services that we need and that we use run out of materials if you have a major storm event. Within 3 days, a grocery store will start to run out of supplies if they're not able to have the trucks and the vehicles get to them to deliver the products, deliver those goods and services that we're needing. So that creates a major problem for them. Then there's also liability. We take a look at it, we try to mitigate some of that liability, especially in the winter time. We try our best that we can to take and make sure that we clear the roads the best that we can, but we still see people suing our organizations or filing complaints against our organizations because of the inability to be able to get from point A to point B, because their expectation is that they're able to travel from point A to point B no matter what this weather is. And in some areas or in some conditions, that makes it very impractical to do. And so we have an issue of being able to keep those roadways open and being able to take and provide that services that we're supposed to provide. So people demand mobility and a safe transportation system. And it's really interesting, um, we find as people from environments that maybe don't have quite as much snow, they come up into our snowbound areas in the summertime, and they think, oh, it's really nice and really beautiful. I'd like to build a house here, or I'd like to take and have a piece of property here or live up here. And then they don't think that, hey, the weather here is not the same as what it was when they lived. Or they don't think about having to remove that snow, during that winter time. And this picture I love for the simple reason that it brings up the whole point of, some of the times we also take and create some problems on our roadways by how we plow that snow, how we take care of that snow. And we're going to talk about that as we take and go throughout the rest of this program. So let's take a look at a little video clip that I have here. Give me just a moment here. So when we take a look at, you know, the the whole activity of plowing that snow, you know, there's some roads that we take and we have a high priority with that we've got to take, and a lot of traffic maybe, and we try and keep that roadway open. And then there's other roadways that, you know, are a little lower on the totem pole, that they're plowed a little less often, like the roadway we were just taking a look at, you know, where, you know, they can leave it for a little while. It may strand a couple of people, but by the same token, you know, there's we have to prioritize our road and our roadway system and our equipment. And so, you know, how on that snow removal program, are you prepared? You know, winter's coming. To be
Hey,
quite
Bruce.
frank, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, Bruce. Hey, let's have you show your screen again so we can see your slides.
Oh, pardon me.
No problem. Or you there you go. Thanks.
Okay, so um, pardon me for the loss of the screen. But so a snow removal program. You know, are you prepared? Have you taken and reviewed that plan? Maybe incorporated some of the other additional roadways? Have you prioritized your road system? Have you taken a look at what roadways or what type of activities and what personnel do you have to take and deal with that snow and that ice? And also, what type of chemicals or what type of products are you going to use? And the other thing that I like to take and really emphasize is, has the operator that's going to be plowing that road, is he aware of what that roadway looks like in the dark? I see it happen a number of different times. I had an operator that came into our maintenance group late in the winter time. Had never really plowed a roadway, and he ended up totaling out a truck by hitting a railroad track that he wasn't aware of, and no one in the crew had made him aware of that. And so these operators need to be aware of what's on that roadway. Where's that guardrail end? Where's that railroad track? Where's that manhole that's sticking up above the road that you're going to snag? Or where's an expansion joint on the bridge that's going to hang up on your plow? All these things need to be within that snow removal program and part of the training that those individuals need to go through. So as we take a look at, okay, as we take a look at some of the things that we're going to be taking a look at in this section is the value of a snow removal plan. We're going to talk a little bit about the elements within that policy, and also talk a little bit about who should have access to that policy and that plan. So as we take a look at the development of a snow removal plan, of course, we've got to take a look at, okay, how much snow do we normally get? And how much snow are we going to be facing? The rate of our snow. You take a look at a snowstorm, you know, an early season snowstorm, we may get 2, 3 inches of snow, but it's going to be heavy, wet, sloppy snow. And we're going to have to get it up off of that roadway as quickly as possible to keep it from packing down and causing problems. Where later on in the year, we may have to look at the rate of the snow in the regards of maybe a lighter snow, but by the same token, it's going to blow and it's going to drift across the roadway and create problems. How much snow are we going to get? Duration of that snowfall. You know, the snow that falls in December is a lot different than the snow that falls in November or falls in February. The timing of those snowstorms. How are they going to come in? Are they going to come in during normal business hours? Or are we going to have to take a look at plowing snow outside those normal business hours? One of the other things is the temperature. The temperature is very critical. You know, you take a look at it right now, you know, like I said, here in Idaho, we've already, in some of our locations, we've already gotten snow. We got snow actually this last weekend. When I was up in Alaska about 4 weeks ago, we got snow while I was up there. So it depends upon your location when you're going to get snow, how that snow is going to act, and that temperature is very critical because the early snowstorms, if it's a real light snow, generally speaking, the ground temperature will melt it off and it won't be much of a problem. But if the ground temperature is falling and you're starting to have snow stick, then you're going to start having more and more problems with that snowfall. Also, what type of wind you're going to have, and have your ditches filled up with snow? Are you going to have a lot of drifting? And which way is the primary direction that you're going to have that drifting? And then, what type of snow? Is it a wet, heavy, sloppy snow that you're going to have a difficult time taking and moving? Or is it going to be a real dry one that the traffic is going to move off your roadways as they travel down the roadway? So you got to take and talk about in your snow removal plan, if we have this type of snow condition and we're going to have this type of weather, we're going to have to take and prioritize what roads we're going to deal with and how we're going to address that snow in those different types of roadways. Some of them, quite frankly, when I was working in maintenance, we had a couple of different roadways. If we had a heavy snowstorm that was going to come and it was late in the year, we had a lot of snow on the ground and it was going to be followed by a windstorm, we closed the road and notify the people along that roadway that, hey, it may be a couple of days before we get out there to deal with that snow. In other conditions where you have a school route, you have an emergency route, you may not be able to close those roadways. Well, then you're going to have to address that weather and how you're going to take and prioritize that type of an event. And so those are the things you need to think about before the weather happens. How are you going to address that weather? How are you going to take and prioritize your roadways? And most agencies have that all set up. But one of the things that I like to see agencies do is document it, write it down, because then you're able to take and share that information that says, hey, these are our primary roadways. These are the secondary roadways. These are the roadways we're not going to plow very often. These are some roadways that we may never plow during the wintertime. And you're able to take and share that with your city council, your commissioners, with your management, with the employees themselves. And in a lot of cases, you take a look at it on a number of organizations that I work with, you go to their webpage and they actually have a winter plan of, this is the roadways that we're going to take and plow first, second, third, and never. um, so that they can take and have the general population be able to look at that plan and know what their expectations are going to be for when you're going to come out, instead of calling you up and saying, hey, when are you going to plow this road? Those are all things, some of the things that you need to think about. You also need to think about what type of geometry do you have on that roadway? What type of equipment, what type of maintenance are you going to take and be able to provide on that roadway? You take a look at that hilly picture, that's a pretty steep roadway, not much as far as keeping vehicles from being able to get up and down it. It's a challenging road, but by the same token, the cul-de-sacs in the urban environments make for a challenging environment, especially when you get a lot of snow. So you need to take into consideration all the topography that you have of your road system. It's not all flat. It's not all just two lane or not all just multiple lane type of roadways. And you've got to take and look at that topography to look at how often you're going to plow, what snow buildup can you take and deal with, what type of equipment do you have available to you, are all things that you're going to have to take a look at. You also need to take into consideration the type, the speed, and the volume of the traffic. If you have a primary roadway and you have a lot of heavy truck traffic, they're going to take and travel in all times of the day, that heavy truck traffic. And so you can anticipate them going to need maybe some snow removal at nighttime. If your volumes are going to be heavy, say at rush hour or at quitting time, how are you going to take and deal with the traffic and the snow during those types of periods of time if you have snowfall? And then on those low volume roadways, which a lot of your roadways, your counties there in Ohio, you've got a lot of low volume roadways, a lot of gravel roadways. You've also got to take into consideration, you don't plow a paved roadway the same way that you plow a gravel roadway. Because if you take and run a plow truck down a gravel roadway in the spring of the year or in the early fall, you're going to throw all your gravel right off into the ditch. And so you need to take and build up a little on those unpaved roadways. You may have to build up a little bit of a snow floor to freeze that material down, so you don't plow all your material out into the ditch. So you've got to look at the types of roadways. What are the priorities of those roadways? And also, what is the expectation of the traveling population? So all those things you need to adjust as you take and you develop your snow removal plan, which a lot of you already have developed it. But by the same token, each year, each fall, as we start coming into the fall time of year, we need to review that plan to make sure that it's current with our current expectations, our current roadways, and our current traffic. Because traffic changes by development in different areas. You may have an increase in roads. You may have a change in expectation from the traveling population. So you look at it, the drivers, the attitude of the drivers, the can take and change. Like here in Boise Valley area, we have a lot of drivers. They're here. This is going to be their first winter, and when snow comes, they may have never driven in it before, and so they may have an expectation of having bare roads all year long. And that expectation may not hold true because we do get snow. Um, I know the Boise Valley area is a pretty mild type of climate, but by the same token, we do get three, four, you know, 3 or 4 feet of snow some years, and boy, it snarls up the traffic very, very significantly. And so we have to make sure that as we're taking and developing that snow removal plan, that the employee is also aware of that snow removal plan so that when they're taking and talking to a driver and that driver voices a concern about maybe the condition of the roadway or the condition of the system, that operator is able to say, well, yeah, these are the things that we have to think about all the time. This is the budget that we're taking and working with. Because if I've had operators that are out there plowing the roadway say, well, that's above my pay grade. What's the expectation of that driver is that you're going to give him or her, the information that they're going to need to be able to get through there safely. And so you need to be able to discuss that winter maintenance plan, that whole winter maintenance activity. Um, so you need to make sure that that attitude is correct and that you're providing them with the correct information. The other thing you need to think about with those drivers and those vehicles is, and I've had it happen a couple of times myself, where somebody said, "Oh, well, you know, the snow is a lot more than I've ever gotten before. And I know you're not supposed to plow private roadways, but can you just plow it this once to help me out?" Well, then if you do, and you don't have it in your policy about plowing private roads, you've now created a expectation. They may expect you to come out here every time that you get a big snowstorm and plow their private road. And then you have a liability if you knock down some fence, if you accidentally hit another vehicle, if you take and do something on that private road that creates some liability, it can create a real problem for you. Also, in that policy, you need to think about those stalled and abandoned vehicles. What do you do with a stalled vehicle and an abandoned vehicle during a snowstorm? Is it in the road? If it's in the road, then generally speaking, most agencies will say if the vehicle's in the road, we may have to contact the sheriff and have the sheriff come up and, get the vehicle moved out of our road system. If it's off in the ditch and out of the way of everything that's going by, uh, the discussion, maybe check on the people, make sure everybody's okay, um, provide them some limited assistance, but how much assistance do you give them? That needs to be spelled out in your snow removal plan, and your employees need to know what is your expectation. How do you deal with those stalled or abandoned type of vehicles? We used to take and always have the policy, when I was plowing snow, that if you had an abandoned a vehicle that was off into the ditch, you checked on the people that are in the vehicle, make sure that they're okay, make sure that they're all right. Uh, if they need immediate assistance, you contact the sheriff's department, the emergency services people to come out and provide them assistance, because you've got to try and keep this roadway open. If they're in the roadway, then you had to call the sheriff immediately to get the sheriff out there to deal with the vehicle and get the vehicle moved. So that level of service, you've got to take and spell out as a part of that snow removal plan. So when we take a look at it, we need to take, and each year we may have a snow removal plan, but that plan, we need to go through and review it every fall. Review that plan, and if you've had changes in the road system, if you've had changes in priority, if you've had modifications, or you've decided to use some other types of chemicals or other types of product to take and deal with the snow and the slick roads, you need to take and put that into that adjust that snow removal plan. But also on top of that, each of those changes may require or need some additional training. So let's take a look at some of the things that should be in that snow removal plan, how to deal with it, and how to take and set it up. So if you would, Mike, I have question number 3 that I'd
Yes.
like you to take and ask.
All right. So here we go. Have you read your organization's human resources manual? And we'll give everybody some time to respond. All right, we got about 50% have voted so far. We'll give some more time. All right, let's see what we have. So Bruce, 74% said yes, 26% said no.
Thank you, Mike. The main reason that I wanted to take and check on that is that because a lot of agencies will take in their human resources document, they have the discussion about their snow removal, their policies about taking and looking at what you need to be dealing with. Let me go back here. Okay, can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, in that HR policy, they generally will take and spell out, your service hours. The organization is open from this hour to this hour. They're closed on Saturdays. They're closed on Sundays. They have that type of information. They also have a lot of expectations. Talking about that they require all their employees to take and wear their seatbelt. They require all their employees to come to work and in a and be able to work and function um, successfully. Not being under the influence of any drugs or alcohol or some of those items. And I found a number of people will take and have gotten into a little bit of a problem is, if you have, say, an employee that's not wearing their seatbelt and you have it in the HR policy that they're required to wear their seatbelt. If it's in the HR policy, it's a condition of employment, meaning that you are required to wear that. And if you have somebody that is not, and your agency or organization is made aware of that, and you do nothing with it, and that person crashes and becomes injured because of that not wearing seatbelt, then that agency can still be held liable for those injuries and those issues. So you need to take a look at that HR policy and find out in the HR policy, does it talk about what are the conditions of employment? What do you have to do as far as making sure that everything is safe? And then in that level of service, you also need to take a look at, okay, what's your service hours? What is your priority levels for your different roadways? Now, I like to see it in most agencies, you have a map of your road system that you currently own or maintain. And that map, you can easily take and color code it or mark it showing these the bus routes, these are the emergency routes, these are the the priorities of our different routes of our entire road system. And I like to be able to see that map for the simple reason that that map is a very handy tool to be able to address that level of service with the traveling population. Saying, hey, we have a budget of this amount of money for the wintertime period, so we have to prioritize the types of work that we're going to be able to do. And in certain snow type of conditions, we're going to have to take and drop back our priority and meet the expectations of these higher priority types of roadways. Also in that level of service is what is your policy dealing with private roads? Like I said, because if you have a policy that you do not deal with plowing private roadways, then it needs to be in your policy, and all your employees need to be made aware of it. Because if somebody arbitrarily decides to plow a private roadway and it's against your policy, then it's been violated, and it creates a false sense of a level of service. And so it can create some problems for your organization. There should also be a process for dealing with emergencies. Let's say you do have a roadway and it's a low priority type of roadway, but you have a house catch on fire or you have somebody injured. Who are they supposed to contact to get emergency services and being able to open up that roadway? Who do they contact? What are the requirements of that going in there? So you need that contact information. And then the other part of the level of service is a general depth of snow required for service. Now, a lot of local jurisdictions that I work with, they say, oh, well, shoot, we don't go out, you know, outside of our normal business hours for just an inch or two of snow. If it gets up over 3, 4, 5 inches and maybe some wind, then we'll go out and do and work. Or in some other cases, they say, if it snows a little bit and then we get some wind and it's drifting, what roadways are we going to try and keep open with that drifting snow? Those things all need to be spelled out in that policy, that level of service. Because if you don't tell them the level of service that you're able to provide for the budget that you have, they will make assumptions about that level of service. And then you're going to get telephone calls, you're going to get complaints, you're going to have those types of issues. So you need to take a look at what's your budget, how much equipment, how much personnel, all those types of things, and establish your level of service. And then make sure your employees are aware of that level of service so they don't go above and beyond that and create that false sense of that level of service. So your level of service is very important. The hours of service are very important within that uh, snow removal plan. And like I said, I like to see an agency map showing the priorities of the roadway. Now, there's two pieces of this snow removal plan. There's the piece that I like to see as part of an informational plan for the traveling population. So let's say you put it on you're going to put it on your web page, you're going to put it on in the newspaper or hand it out to people saying this is our level of service. I like to see a priority map saying these are our high priority roadways, these are intermediate priority roadways, these are our low priority roadways, and these are the roadways that we won't plow in the winter at all. And then what are the hours of service? And that those hours of service may be modified due to snow needs or our agency needs to take and be able to get out there and deal with some of the winter storms. And also, what are the depths that you'll deal with? Because each roadway is going to be a little bit different. Your high priority roadways, it may be, when snow reaches the depth of 2 inches on the roadway, or when we start to accumulate snow on the roadway, we need to go out and we'll be out there working on those roadways during these hours or at any time. Depends upon the policy of the organization. Then on some lower priority roadways, it may take 4 or 5 or 6 inches or a greater accumulation of snow before we'll go out and plow on those roadways. And then on your low priority roadways, it may be that we'll get to those roadways as we have time and personnel available to plow them. And that's the public information. Then as far as your snow removal plan, there's the internal information. And what I personally like to see as far as that internal information are things like what are the priorities of the roadways and who is responsible or who's going to be plowing those sections of roadways, who's going to manage them. The reason I like to see that is that I like to see it to where people are able to go out. Say I've got John Smith is going to plow this one section of roadway. I want John Smith to be familiar with that roadway. I want him to be able to go out there and know where their route is and what roadways they're going to be managing or maintaining, and what are the hazards. And quite frankly, I like to see it where those operators that are going to be plowing that roadway have been out on that roadway at nighttime. The reason being is that you go plowing in the middle of winter and your sun doesn't come up till 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, and you go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, it's going to be dark out there. And you need to be aware of where all the hazards are at, where the guardrail ends are, where the bridge abutment ends are, where's the signs, where the other items that are along that roadway. I have one agency that I've done a lot of work with here in Idaho, that what they do is they take and in the manual of uniform traffic control devices, it talks about that you need to do an inspection of your traffic control devices at nighttime, ensuring that they're visible and readable at nighttime as well as the daytime. Well, what they do is they take their truck drivers or their plow operators, and they have assigned them roadways, and they put two of them together in a pickup and have them drive that roadway at nighttime, marking, checking the signs, making sure they're in good condition, making sure that they're in the proper position, and also checking where the hazards are at, where the guardrail ends are at, where the bridge abutments are at, where the manhole is above the pavement, or where they have a expansion joint on a bridge that fits the plow blade. So they have to mark those areas, be aware of them. So you have those two pieces of information: the public winter removal plan and also the internal removal plan, talking more specifically of who's going to take and be plowing that roadway, maybe in who they contact if they need assistance, or who do they contact. So taking a look at that. So who establishes the level of service? Generally speaking, you take a look at most of the levels of services for the counties and the cities are by the engineer. You also need to take and gather input in it from the operations department. Verify that the level of service is workable for the plow routes, depending upon the amount of snow. And also, quite frankly, you listen to the public expectations, but you've got to fit it within your budget and your activity, and then review your level of service that you're providing. It's like one agency that I've dealt with over the years, actually a couple of different agencies, their level of service in their city, and these were cities that were in the population range of about 125,000 individuals. They sat there and they said, well, our level of service, our level of expectation by the traveling population is that we have a bare road. Now, through the use of chemicals and through the use of a lot of additional work, you can keep virtually a bare road in any type of an environment as long as you have an unlimited budget, through the use of chemicals and through the use of other items. But is it realistic? No. In Ohio, as well as a lot of the snow belt states, it's not realistic to say we're going to keep a bare road. And what these agencies found is that they were damaging their infrastructure by the use of chemicals so heavily. They also found that they were getting some of those chemicals into their groundwater, causing problems with the environment because they're using the chemicals so heavily. And so they had to step back that level of service. Do you know the turmoil that they ended up taking and having when they stepped back that level of service from what they had taken and taught their client that they're going to maintain? And they started saying, oh, well, instead of having a bare road, we're going to have a road that'll be covered with snow once in a while. Well, they suffered a lot of complaints from that traveling population. So think about that level of service. Think about what is the public's expectation versus what can you actually do. Because if you don't, you may establish a level of service that is unattainable, or it's attainable, but you're going to damage your infrastructure or your environment of your community, of your county or your city. And so you need to take and manage those expectations. We actually had a case take place here in Boise, Idaho, about 4 years ago. They had maintained a level of service in our roadways here in Boise that was pretty high. Our roads were bare within a couple of hours of most of our snowstorms, and they used some chemical and some other products to take and manage it. But then we had one year, 4 years ago, that we call it Snowmageddon. Um, we had snow come in, and we were getting feet of snow every snowstorm. Well, they had to step back that level of service, but by the same token, the maintenance engineer for that jurisdiction came out and said, "Oh, well, we're not going to manage or maintain your your subdivision roadways because we don't have the personnel or the equipment. We have to manage our primary roadways. So you're going to have to hire your own people to plow that roadway. But you have to get permission from us before you use that plow." Well, that created a nightmare. And he was actually terminated because of his discussion about not providing service to their clients. So you've got to be careful about that level of service. Don't become too specific. Keep it generic, and also keep and let people know that once in a while you get a storm that is going to be far exceed what your expectations are. And so you're going to have to adjust that level of service accordingly. Some of the benefits of that well thought out level of service. If you have a good level of service, you're balancing the safety of the traveling population and your employees with the mobility of them being able to get from point A to point B and your people being able to plow those roadways and manage that. Also the cost. What is the cost? Both monetary cost, as well as the environmental cost. Give you an example. I have one agency that I've talked to a number of different times. It's a metropolitan type of agency, and they said our level of service is pretty much bare roads. As soon as that snow hits the ground, we want it to melt. They started using a calcium chloride pellet wetted with a magnesium chloride product, and they were putting that onto their roadways. Well, they found that their sidewalks, their curbs and gutters started spalling quite heavily because they were using so much of that chemical. So it's creating a problem for their infrastructure. It also took and started rusting the vehicles, rusting the bridges, rusting a lot of items because sodium chloride, calcium chloride, and magnesium chloride are all salts and they're all corrosive, but they're also the product that most agencies use. And so overusing it created an environmental and also a cost problem for that agency. The other benefit is it saves salt, saves time, and saves money. It saves your resources, taking a look at being able to use the resources that are going to benefit you the most. You also want to take and make sure that your level of service is realistic so you're not creating that environmental hazard. You're not seeing your chemicals showing up in your water system, not showing your grasses and your trees dying alongside the roadway because you're using too much chemical. You also need to manage that customer expectation. Make sure that customer is aware of what's going on. Some of the things that we're going to talk about in our tomorrow. We're going to talk about snow removal. We're going to talk about the ability for chemicals to help you with that snow removal and some of the ways that you want to take and preserve that chemical or that product in the roadway so you don't take and just put it on the roadway and then throw it off into the ditch or up onto somebody's lawn. So that level of service needs to be well thought up. And can you do it consistently year after year? One of the things I tell a lot of agencies that you establish your level of service, you look at it each fall, and then as you go through your winter, you take and keep reviewing that level of service. Oh, how's our budget doing? Are we going to be able to hit our target as far as not expending all of our budget, but being able to provide that level of service? Do we need to take and adjust that level of service? Or do we need to take and adjust our budget? Both of those things are going to impact your ability to be able to provide for that client that's traveling that roadway, making sure that that roadway is safe for that traveling population. So level of service is very important. And like I said, in that comprehensive snow plan, we take a look at our level of service before the storms. Here's what we're going to be able to do. How successful were we after the storm? Is it doable? Is it practical to be able to provide that level of service? Also, one of the other things I've seen some agencies do, and I'm not sure if you do it in Ohio or not, is that I have some agencies that use snow gates on their grader blades and on their plow blades to where when they come up along a driveway, they drop their snow gate that keeps the snow in the blade until they get past the driveway. Then they open it up and let the snow go out. So it tries to take and reduce some of the issues that the client has with us putting snow in their driveway. So we need to take a look at, is it doable and is it practical? Our clients, bare pavement is the best type of roadway that our clients can drive on. But by the same token, we can't always achieve that. So that needs to be spelled out in that comprehensive snow plan. The plowing, and also then, especially when you get into the metropolitan areas, how are you going to take and dispose of that snow? A lot of agencies have ran into real issues with snow disposal for the simple reason that there's all the chemicals in it and also the debris in it, and it becomes a hazardous product. So you need to take a look at where you're going to dump your excess snow? How are you going to dispose of it in those metropolitan areas, especially as it builds up around the intersections? What's going to be, your devices that you're going to use to haul it and dispose of it? And also dealing with snow routes. One of the things I've ran into, I had an agency that took in and they wanted to reestablish their snow routes, those areas that they don't allow parking on the city street between certain hours, because that's when they want to be able to get in there and be able to plow that roadway and haul that snow off of that roadway. So they don't want those parked cars there. The agency came in, they said, okay, during these months of the year, we're not going to allow parking between these hours of time. They came up, they put in some signage there along that parking area that said, no parking between the hours of this and this on these months of the year, because this is a snow route. Well, one of the city council members thought, hey, this would be a great sign. We need to take and make these signs fluorescent pink, because it will really stand out against the snow. Make it so that people can see it. Well, they put them up. They bought $10,000 worth of signs. They put up the signs. The first time they wrote a ticket against the no parking in the parking area, it was taken to court and they lost, because the color of the sign was wrong. And so they had to take down their $10,000 worth of signs and put up the correct sign, which should have
Hey,
been red and white.
hey, Bruce. Sorry to
Yes,
interrupt.
no problem.
It looks like your slides might be stuck on our screens. We're still seeing a level of service slide.
It should be a comprehensive snow plan, key elements.
Okay, so I think if you could hit maybe stop sharing screen and then show screen
Restart.
again to restart, maybe it got stuck.
Okay. How's that look,
Okay,
Mike?
good. What we might need to do, if you don't mind, is scroll back a few slides, just so people can maybe see some of the ones you've pointed out, and then just keep moving forward.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, no problem. I appreciate you mentioning it, because I couldn't see that. My slides were moving just normally.
Sounds
So,
good. Thanks, Bruce.
okay. So here's the level of service, talking about some of the minimums, talking about the service hours, the priority levels, the policies, dealing with the emergencies, contact information, the general depth of snow required before service. Uh, Additional items can be at the agency map. I really like seeing the agency map. And then, like I mentioned, I like to see the agency map internally, to where, you know, if you're assigning people to certain sections of roadways, it's a great tool to be able to do that. Who establishes the level of service? Generally speaking, it's the jurisdiction. You know, but the jurisdiction needs to take a look at the operation, verify the level of service is workable and will work for the routes that they've got. Listen to the public expectations, and also take a look at the successes and the failures as you go through the year, and adjusting. Do you need to adjust the level of service? And then we talked about the benefits of the of having that level of service, that snow removal plan. Are my slides moving ahead okay, Mike?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. Just want to keep checking. And then here's what we were talking about, checking your goal of your level of service. after the storm, making sure it's doable, making sure that you've optimized for safety, um, plowing versus hauling and disposal, making sure that you have a plan for that hauling and that disposal, and that your people have been trained on what are the safety considerations. You get a dump truck and a loader and you're picking up snow and you're getting ready to haul it off. You've still, if you leave that roadway open, you've got to really be careful, and it's really concerning about the traveling population traveling around that equipment, moving around in that snow environment, dumping that disposable snow someplace. Also, having, of course, your emergency snow routes and your parking, and making sure that people are aware of where you don't want them to park during certain hours of the day so you can remove that snow without having all those parked cars. How do you notify them? I was talking about the issue with one agency not using the right type of signage to let that traveling population know there's a no parking zone. Comprehensive plan needs to take a look at the roadways, the streets, even the alleyways. If you're going to be taking and plowing those alleyways, what parking facilities or parking areas might you be removing snow out of? What type of public facilities? And where do they fit in the priority of that snow removal? Crosswalks and also sidewalks. I know there's a lot of agencies, especially in the larger metropolitan areas, that they come in and they remove the snow off the sidewalk or crosswalks. How do you take and make sure that it's done efficiently and doesn't take and cause problems for your agency or organization? So that needs to be addressed in that snow removal plan. Special items like you don't want to take and bury your fire hydrants in your metropolitan areas. You want to take and make sure that you don't damage or cause problems with your drainage facilities, whether you're urban or rural. Your guardrail, your train tracks, all those things you need to take and talk about in that snow removal plan internally, and let them know, hey, you've got a train track on this such and such a roadway, and if you've got to take and how are you going to do maintenance? Because if you hit that train track, in most parts of the country, that train track is owned by the railroad, and then you've damaged their facility. Um, and also, same thing with guardrail. If you take and you hit that guardrail or damage that guardrail, it can create a problem for that traveling population. So all those things need to be spelled out in part of that snow removal plan. So there's a lot of pieces and parts to the snow removal plan. The other thing, internally, you want to make sure that people are aware of who do they contact or who do they report to during these different types of snow events. They have a specific person. A lot of agencies will say, okay, you're going to be on call at these days, and you're the person that's supposed to call everybody else out when we have a snowstorm. You need to make sure that those people are aware of that. Who reports to who takes and contacts out to the workers in the organization to call them out to work and just plow. And those people that are going to call out need to be aware of what are the snow levels and also what are the requirements as far as overtime, emergency declarations, and then also who receives and deals with the complaints. Those individuals need to, whoever's taking those phone calls, who deals with those complaints, need to make sure that they are responding to those people in accordance to what your plan calls out. because if they don't, it can create some liability and some real issues for you. Personnel policies, work hours. What hours or what shifts are those individuals are going to be working? One of the other things you need to think about in a snow removal policy or plan is if you're going to call people out, you need to also talk about what they should not be doing if they're going to be called out. We've had some issues where a person was going to be called out and they've been over at a friend of theirs watching a football game, having a few libations, adult libations, and is not able to work. So some of those things need to be taking a look at is what type of activity are you able to take and specify as far as calling out employees that are able to take and do the work. Overtime distribution, whether you're uh, paying overtime or you're taking and providing comp time. I don't know if in Ohio, I assume that some agencies probably provide comp time to their people or look at adjusting their time to deal with that overtime distribution. You also, if you have unions that are involved in your snow removal, you got to take a look at that union contract and then make sure that the employees are trained on that snow removal plan, as well as some of the safety considerations with the equipment they're going to be operating and the chemicals they're going to be dealing with. Most of the chemicals that we use in snow removal are, a lot of them are hydroscopic, meaning that they'll pull moisture out of everything that touches them. So your gloves, your boots, your other items are going to take and be dried out because of that hydroscopic type of activity. Also, other considerations about some of the chemicals, some of the products that we use in snow removal have safety considerations for the employee that have to be addressed. So those employees need to be trained on those types of items. So, Mike, here's a checkpoint. Question
Yeah.
number 4.
All right. So here we are. Does your organization use a specification when ordering winter chemicals? And we see the responses starting to arrive. Okay, we've got about 60% have voted. We'll give some more time. Okay. So Bruce, 73% said yes, 27% said no.
Okay. Could we go ahead and ask question 5?
Yep. Here we go. Do you test those chemicals to ensure that they meet those specifications? And we'll give some more time here. Okay. And the group said 35% said yes, 65% said no.
Thank you, Mike. Did your screen change okay?
Yes, Bruce, thanks.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to check. I've always had a saying that a local agency needs to trust but verify everything that they buy. One of the analogies I look at is that, if you go into the grocery store and go to buy a dozen eggs, most people will open up that dozen of eggs and make sure that they're not broken. We need to have that same type of policy, especially with snow removal equipment or snow removal chemicals, because you take a look at. I know I've done a lot of work with Morton Salt Company and also Compass Chemicals out of the Salt Lake area, and they have different gradations for rock salt. They have, well, actually for salt, for sodium chloride, you might have a gradation that's for table salt because they make a lot of table salt. They also have another gradation for rock salt. Um, and in that gradation, there's also a moisture content. Because you think about it, how do you buy salt? Sodium chloride. Most agencies do buy some sodium chloride, and it's usually by the ton. So if you have a salt truck, and I've actually seen it where a salt truck comes to deliver some salt to a yard I was working at, and it's a large semi truck, dump truck, you know, and he raises his bed, and the first thing coming out of that bed is water. You bought that water, you paid for it, but can you use it? So you need to take and check your chemicals. Um, if you buy a liquid chemical, a magnesium chloride, for an example, if you look at a bottle of magnesium chloride, can you tell the concentration of it? Is it 32% or 22%? It's very hard to actually tell what percentage you're getting, but you're buying it by the ton. And so the more water you have into it, the less product you're going to be able to use. And so you need to take and make sure that your employees have received training on how to check those chemicals and make sure you're getting your money's worth of that product. And everybody needs to be trained. Everybody that's going to be taking and dealing with snow removal, they may need to be trained on what's that winter policy is going to look like, how to respond to different phone calls. It's just like I had a phone call one time when I was working in maintenance. It was from one of our senators in the state legislators here in Boise. And she sat there and she says, I own a cabin up in Island Park, and I'm planning on driving up to my cabin this weekend, and I want that road bare. And my response to her was, I'm sorry, ma'am, I understand your situation, but our policy by the state of Idaho is that that road does not receive salt. And so I cannot make it bare. You bought the house up in Island Park. You need to be aware of the road system. And that's some of the things that a agency needs to take and be sure that they train their people on. Train those maintenance people on how to take and respond to those questions properly so they don't create a liability, and also make sure that they're trained on their piece of equipment, that they've taken and been trained on how to inspect it. If they have to change the cutting blades, how to do that safely, how to take and do their inspections on the hydraulics and all the other systems on that piece of equipment, and also how to plow their road successfully. Training needs to be a budget line item. I find it happening all the time that as budgets fluctuate, so too does the training budget. But yet, you take a look at the ability of some of your staff, they can cost you a lot of money if they're not properly trained. So training is an investment in your personnel. And so you need to make sure that they're trained. And if they get a new piece of equipment, they need to be trained on that piece of equipment. And you should have included that as part of your budget for the purchase of that new piece of equipment. As an operator over the years, I've operated a lot of different types of motor graders. Everything, well, I started out on a Huber, a Galleon, a John Deere, a Champion, and a Cat. I've ran all of them. Everyone operates a little bit differently, and they need to make sure that they're trained and they have the muscle memory to be able to operate it quickly and efficiently when they're out there plowing snow. And if they haven't been trained how to do it, they're going to take and damage that piece of equipment or damage some other items that are out there along that roadway. So they need to be trained. So an investment in the proper knowledge of what they're supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to do it. The cost of taking and plowing snow, how they can take and reduce that cost, work more efficiently. Also taking and making sure that their attitude and their safety are all taken into consideration as you're taking and building that future of this organization, making sure that they're aware of what is their role in taking and making sure that the roadways are safe and operational for your organization. So take a look at making sure that the employee has gone through either through, tailgate safety talks, safety committee policies, make sure that they're using the proper personal protective equipment, making sure that they're handling the materials correctly, that they're not going to cause you as an organization problems or damage the equipment or the vehicles that they're operating, and make sure that they're aware of how's this organization supposed to work, what are the issues, what are the problems, and making sure that they're aware of the goals and the level of service of your organization. Now, as an organization, some of the other things you might want to be able to take a look at is, you need to know what that weather is going to be doing in the near future. So you may need to take a look at weather forecasting, having an understanding of what the weather systems are going to be doing. You take a look in Ohio, you get a lot of your weather comes down from the south, down from the north, comes down into Ohio. You take and it combines with those warm, moist, Gulf Stream systems, and you can get a pretty heavy snowstorm with a lot of wind. And so there's a number of different tools out there that you can use to take and get an idea of what your weather forecast is and how it's going to come in. We've used the radio, the TV for years. The TV weather system has gotten very accurate. Their Doppler radar and some of their other systems. There's a lot of internet. You take a look at the internet has a lot of forecasting tools out there. The road weather information systems. In Ohio, you have a very extensive road weather information system that takes a look at the weather that's coming across the state, and you can kind of take a look at what's the ground temperature, what's the air temperature, what type of precipitation, what's the wind speed and direction. All that information, I'll talk about that here in just a moment, a little bit in greater detail. Almost every state in the United States has what they call a 511 system, where you're able to take and go out on the internet and be able to pull up the road weather information systems and be able to look at what the weather's doing, look at where they have road closures, where they have weather events that are impacting the roadway system. So it's a very handy little tool for agencies and organizations to take a look at. You also need to take a look at sharing that that snow removal policy, that snow removal plan, providing it to planning and zoning organizations so that people as they move into your area or as companies or organizations are looking at moving into your area, they can take a look at that snow removal plan. Share it in your local newspaper, the priority map, the hours of service, the contact phone number for the organization, not for the individuals, for the organization, can all be provided in the newspaper. Your plan could also be posted in your break room so your employees can take a look at it. Your Facebook page, so that people can take a look and say, oh yeah, this is Cincinnati's snow removal plan. This is what it should look like. This is what it is on the for that metropolitan organization. Provide that information out. You need to inform your employees of what's contained in that plan and what are the levels of service. The elected officials have a, making sure that your elected officials say and understand your plan and approve your plan, and then provide it out to the general population as information. The policies for the agencies need to be incorporated into that snow removal, and the employees have to have that understanding of what those policies are. Some of the tools that you may have to take a look at is look at weather forecasts. What type of weather are you going to get at different periods of the year? These snowstorms are going to be coming up here in the next month or so in Ohio. They're going to, generally be fairly wet. The ground's still going to be warm, so they're going to melt off. Then later on in the year, in December and January, when it gets colder, your snow is going to be drier, but it's going to take and accumulate a little bit more. It's not going to melt off. It's going to stick around because your ground's probably froze. So your techniques for dealing with that different types of snow are going to change. And then what type of plows, what type of plow circuits do you have, or roadways are you going to deal with? One thing I take and I keep telling plow operators is if you cannot knock the snowbank down to where it's not going to create a drift, then maybe you need to take and use something else that's going to be able to push it down. Like if you're plowing it with a truck and you're stacking it up, don't push it out to where you can't reach it anymore. Let the motor grader with a wing come over and push it off and flatten it out. Or use a rotary or a snow blower to take and throw it back off of the roadway instead of creating that berm that's going to create you more of a problem. Know the chemicals you're going to be using, weather application rates. Using more chemical isn't necessarily a good thing. Use the chemical that you need to do the job, but just because it's working, don't put on more because you're going to create problems. You also need to take a look at, do you use snow fences, snow trenches? Are those types of tools that you use to take and manage that snow and keep that snow from getting out onto the roadway? The other thing that I see happen quite a bit, especially in the Midwest, is where farmers will take their bales of hay and put them alongside their property next to the road. Well, that creates a snow drift that's going to create you problems. And we'll talk about that more tomorrow. But make sure you're not, somebody along the roadway is not creating you some problems. And the other tool is abrasives. Using abrasives, a lot of agencies use them, and they're a very good tool, but you've got to understand that abrasives, if they're used by themselves, by the second or third car, you've lost 70% of that traction ability of that abrasive in that lane of that car or that vehicle. And so they're something you've got to keep applying over and over and over. And so, looking at your abrasive usage and what type of abrasive you're using needs to be within that snow removal plan. Now, like I said, there's an, oops, I get, and you can use as far as weather forecast, your local news. I actually thought I'd change this slide. The Ohio DOT actually has a travel map, and I'll have to have Mike. For some reason, it didn't make it onto the slide, but I'll send him a link to the Ohio travel map, and so that you can take a look at the different RWIS sites that are in Ohio, because you have a very extensive number of sites. And like I said, the Ohio RWIS sites will list you the whether they're getting precipitation, what type of precipitation they're receiving, what's their wind speed, their wind direction, what's the surface temperature, what's the air temperature, are all things you need to know when you're taking a look at dealing with your weather events, because that's going to determine how the snow is going to act and how it's what type of problems or issue may you come up against when you're out there plowing the snow. So those road weather information systems can be very handy for your organization to take a look at how's the snow progressing across the state. When's it going to get here? When's it going to take place in this area? I use those 511 sites or the road weather information systems to help predict, as that snow is moving across the state, when am I going to see that storm arriving? This is actually, if you take a look at the top of this web page, where it says the weather.dtn.com, and then the rest of that web address is the web address in the state of Ohio for getting to the RWIS sites. Every orange, red, and green dot on this screen is an RWIS site someplace in Ohio. And you have Indianapolis there in the picture, Louisville down towards the middle, and you can access this DTN site by going to this web page. It'll ask you for your username and password, and it's the username is ODOTRWIS. The password is the same thing, ODOTRWIS, and then it'll allow you to get into this DTN weather security page. You'll be able to click on that site, and if you look on the screen, I clicked on one site and outside of Cincinnati, and it takes and it shows you the temperature, air temperature, wind, which is light and variable. The dew point tells you the velocity or the visibility, also if it has any precipitation and what type of precipitation is it. So you can go to this website. I'll go down to the next slide, and you can take a look at different locations around the state because most local jurisdictions do not have road weather information systems. These are all on the state highway system, but they can be used to take and get an idea of what the weather, how the weather is changing as it comes across the state. So it's a really nice little tool for agencies to take a look at. Um, Most of the a lot of other states actually use the 511 system for this same information. You can also take and go in and look at the some of the summary information, some of the history, um, as far as these RWIS sites around the state of Ohio. I have this drawing of this low pressure system because there's a couple of things that I'd like to take and share with an agency. You'll see a map, a weather map, and you'll have a low pressure system. And I want to explain a couple of things. If you take a look at the black lines are pressure gradients. And as the black lines get closer together, your wind speeds are going to increase because that means the pressure gradient is getting uh, deeper and deeper, and so your wind speed's going to increase. And some of the other things you need to take and think about, the red line, that's a warm front. Generally speaking, on a warm front, you're going to have a warmer temperature behind it than what's in front of it. And a lot of times in the warm front, you'll have a lot of precipitation, whether it's rain or snow or that type of item. A lot of times in the wintertime, you may have a warm front that comes through Ohio. It will probably drop some rain, which on top of a frozen ground is going to make for a very slick road. So you need to take and be aware of what type of precipitation you're going to have there. The blue line is a cold front. And of course, as that cold front moves across, the temperature in front of the front is warmer than what it is behind it. And so you're going to have some precipitation. And a lot of times you'll get the snow type of activity. Now, as you look at that low pressure, if you have that low pressure moving south of you and you're in the upper part of that low pressure area, your precipitation is going to be pretty intense. You're going to get a lot of moisture, whether it's snow or whether it's rain, depending upon your temperature. So how that front comes across your area is going to determine how much precipitation you're going to receive. The weather systems, the television weather systems, the radio weather systems have gotten very good about being able to predict the storms that are going to come across your state. And so they're probably one of your better outlets to determine what your weather system is going to be and how much snow you're going to get. But having some of the basic information, looking at the gradients, how tight the gradients are, going to tell you, are you going to have wind for, you know, real strong winds? If you have a lot of ammunition laying out there in the form of snow, you're going to have a lot of drifting, a lot of blowing and drifting snow, and it's going to be pretty nasty. So you need to be aware of that when you're planning your snow removal, your snow throughout the year, how those fronts are going to come across your work area. So some of the valuable information that you're going to be taking a look at, as far as what you need to know is you need to know what your surface temperature is, not only your air temperature, but what's your surface temperature. Say, for an example, you may have a cold front that comes in and your air temperature is going to drop down into 20 degrees. But if you haven't had a lot of real cold weather, your surface temperature may still be above 40 degrees. And in that case, when you get snow, that snow is going to hit that ground and pretty much melt fairly quickly versus having a warm front where the air temperature might be 40 degrees and your surface temperature might only be 20, you'll get some precipitation. And if it falls as rain, it may freeze to the ground and cause you problems. You also need to take and be aware of the wind speed. Like you all know, once you start getting some snow on the ground and that wind speed takes and starts kicking in, it's going to fill your borrow ditches up with that snow. And then once the borrow ditches or the ditches along the roadway get filled with snow, you're going to have drifting. And then, depending upon if your prevailing wind is from the south or the north or the east or the west, that's going to determine which roads are going to be impacted by that drifting. And that has to be taken into consideration. The other thing that I really like about the new forecasts that they've been doing for the last number of years is they have a very good idea of when your temperatures are going to change, when you're going to start seeing snow, what type of wind speed you're going to have. Those have to be taken into consideration to determine, okay, are we going to have to go out early in the morning to plow snow for the bus routes? Are we going to have to take and schedule those types of activities? Your current snow depth and your future snow depth are all things you need to look at as you're taking and going throughout the winter to determine how much drifting you're going to have, how many problems you're going to have along those areas. And like I say, generally you'll see the most snow fall if you have a temperature that gets between 35 and about 25. When you get down to the 20s and lower than say 20 degrees, your air air mass is drying out so much that your snow is going to be light and fluffy, and you're not going to accumulate a lot of snow. But generally, when you have a storm come in that's going to drop a lot of snow, you'll see your temperature come up a little bit, and that's the time to take and be applying your chemicals, applying your um, products that are going to take and keep that snow from bonding to your bare roads if you've got them, or be able to break down that snow floor if you have snow floor on those roadways. So those are the times that you want to take a look at using those chemicals and be aware of what type of chemical you're using, because each one of them impacts that roadway in a little different way. So my objective today was to take a look at how do we set those expectations for those clients. Make sure those expectations are achievable for your organization within the budget and the personnel that you currently have. Who should know the agency snow removal plan? The public needs to be aware of what the expectation is of your organization, as well as far as the level of service, and also what routes you're going to be plowing and when, approximately when. But you need to have a more in-depth level of plan as far as your employees are concerned, so that they know which routes they're supposed to plow, what type of service are they supposed, level of service they're supposed to provide, and which roadways are they not supposed to plow. Because if they start plowing roadways, providing services that are not a part of your plan, that can create a liability for your organization, because then it creates an expectation that you may not be able to achieve or maintain. So you need to make sure your employees are aware of that plan. So those are my objectives for this first section, part one. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about equipment and plowing of roadways, generally for the motor grader, the maintenance of the motor grader, as well as winter survival. Then Thursday we'll be covering, of course, the chemicals that are used in winter maintenance. So I would like to be able to open up this a little bit of time, Mike, if we have any additional questions.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. The questions box is open. So at this time, we'd like to invite anyone who has a question from today's presentation to please go ahead and type that in. We will be glad to answer any of those questions. And at the moment, I don't see anything else, Bruce, but certainly, if you have any questions you think of even by tomorrow, when we log in tomorrow afternoon, please bring those questions with you. Bruce, did you have any closing comments otherwise for this afternoon?
Yes, I'd like to first off thank the Ohio LTAP Center for sponsoring this program, but I'd
Yeah,
also like to thank each of the members or each of the individuals that attended this session. And if you do have any additional questions or any comments, um, please come to the session tomorrow with your questions and we can address those. We will have some time tomorrow. It's a pretty full session, but we do have time to answer some additional questions. So thanks again, Mike, and the staff at LTAP and the people that attended the session.
you're welcome, Bruce. We have one comment that says, "Thank you, Bruce. Excellent information." So we appreciate that. And thanks everyone for participating today. We look forward to part 2 of this course tomorrow afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. You still there, Mike?
Yep, we'll go ahead and close out, Bruce, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.